Shabbat Shalom. I hope you can hear me. No?
You have to kind of swallow that mic, and we can
Okay,
adjust.
so you gotta get really close.
Raise it up. She says.
How's that?
Okay.
Better?
How is that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Right there? Okay, great. Awesome.
Our picture's okay?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all. And that's a really good point. So first of all, thank you, Rabbi. My name is Ian Ward. I'm a city councillor in City of Colwood, one of 13 municipalities. We have more municipal politicians around here than you could shoot a cannon through. You hit about 10 of them in the city. So I'm very honored to be here. So thank you for inviting me in. I'm not Jewish, and this is actually only my third Shabbat I've gathered with my Jewish friends. The first time was as a 12-year-old with my Jewish aunt in New York. The second time was just weeks ago at the Western Wall. And today, which is a little less intimidating than 2 weeks ago. So I traveled to Israel several weeks ago with the Jewish Federation and CJA, a number of politicians from various sides of the aisle, various levels, federal, provincial. I was the only municipal politician, as well as some folks in the Jewish community, and 2 rabbis. And as the rabbi I said, they needed 2 because that way you got 20 different perspectives on everything. So I'll start off here. So as I say, I was invited to travel with this group. I won't reference a lot of names, and many of the photos don't show the people I was traveling with. Some of the political folks, for reasons we can all understand, are actively working behind the scenes and don't want their the association to be as widely known as others do. I absolutely have no issues with it. As Rabbi Lynn said, I sort of met online after October 7th. On October 7th, I was a very vocal person in my space talking about anti-Semitism and what had happened and how we should react. And the message I tell people is that I really shouldn't have a voice. I shouldn't even be here, in that if there was moral clarity, every politician would have spoken out and said something on October 7th and October 8th and 9th and so on, at every level. So I would be one, if you were to line them all up, I'd be at the back of the crowd, right? It'd be the federal folks up front and the provincial folks and a huge horde of municipal politicians all taking a stand for what is right. And I'd be lost in that crowd. But unfortunately, I'm very much a fairly lone voice, certainly in this region. But I continue to be a voice because I have Jewish family, I have Jewish friends, but more importantly, I think I have moral clarity. You don't need to have either to do what's right. So anyway, that's how I ended up in Israel. Long-winded way of getting past the title slide. I'm sorry, I'm a politician. So I've kind of gone in chronological order, and I'll just really touch on it. I mean, the purpose of this mission is sort of educational, to understand kind of the state of Israel right now. Obviously experience some of the things that have happened and are ongoing. One of the first individuals we met with was a fellow named Khaled Abu Tuama, and some might know him. He's a very well-known Israeli Arab journalist, writes for the Jerusalem Post, was on NBC for many years, and he kind of gave us the Arab perspective. From his view, he had been kind of a canary in the coal mine, or somebody who, prior to October 7th, was quite vocal about the potential for something to happen. And, really his take on it was fairly direct. It was that, in the Middle East, weakness invites violence. And leading up to October 7th, as we know, there was a lot of political turmoil in Israel, a lot of concerns around judicial reform. And he said, while this was a good thing in Israeli society, there was a lot of questioning and a healthy democracy, right? Like we see here. The other side, if you want to call it that, didn't view it that way. They viewed it as internal turmoil and weakness invites an opportunity to do something. The one piece I didn't mention is also the possibility of agreements with countries like Saudi Arabia. That was very threatening to others. So he said, well, the Iranian belief, he was very connected to them, is that Israel was kind of going to self-destruct on their own. But there was a more hardline view that, well, it wasn't moving fast enough, but let's take advantage of this moment. And he pointed to headlines at the time where, so IDF reservists and pilots were saying, well, we're not going to participate in military action and things unless Netanyahu steps down or there's judicial reform. This, he said, created conditions where, the folks in Hamas and Islamic Jihad and others said, okay, this is our time. They're going to fall apart anyway. Let's strike now. Nobody will care. So maybe we can jump forward a slide here. So again, just going in kind of chronological order of what we did. So we visited Yad Vashem, which don't needs any explanation to anyone here. Israel's national memorial to the Holocaust. I think very moving experience. The key piece for us there was meeting with a professor from Hebrew University, Wayne Horowitz. So one of the individuals who I can't name, there were two of them with us, were from the indigenous community, and not sort of localized, but very much national voices with the Canada's indigenous community at a very high level, responsible for treaties and leadership of Canada's indigenous community. So we had discussions with the professor and with indigenous folks from Canada about what I kind of call is this false equivalence or this false narrative that Israel is a settler colonial state. And we all see it and we hear it. I mean, I think that has very much been the mantra of some of the pro-Palestinian protest movements in Canada, has been to try to tie the two together. So we had a great deal of discussion, and I think the key outcome here was that it was a very powerful statement at the end to a large group of people, but this Canadian Indigenous leader who speaks at the United Nations and elsewhere, she stood up and she said, just for clarity, from my perspective and that of the many Indigenous leaders that I know, we do not view Israel as a settler colonial project. We view Israel as a success story. Kind of some people looked around and said, well, what do you mean? She said, it's the world's leading example of Indigenous reclamation. And in a model for Indigenous peoples around the world to come home and essentially not only have what is theirs, but to build a thriving economy, a thriving society. So, she said that's the model that Canada's Indigenous leaders view as the world's leader. And so she also stated that as the Indigenous community, they need to do more and step up and stop this co-opting of the Indigenous community. Around here, for example, we have a group that their social media is called Lekwungen to Palestine. And there are no members of the Lekwungen nation involved in this group. They're not endorsed by the Songhees or Kasepsum peoples of the Esquimalt nation. They're just using their name. And so she said, we need to work together to put a stop to that. Maybe we'll go to the next slide. So from there, we completely changed gears and went to the far north of Israel, a slightly more economically challenged part of Israel. 56% of the population are Arab there. So it's a challenging community, obviously, in the Golan area. The economy is not as vibrant. There's a lot of farming and other things, but it's under threat. And I think this was I tried to pick some photos that would kind of speak to it. One of the things that we don't really think about post-October 7th, we think of the incident and the deaths and the hostages, but we don't think of the upheaval in Israeli society. And in the north, the great fear prior to October 7th was that Hezbollah was going to do what Hamas did. There were far more people thought it would happen there. And because of what happened now, the evacuations from the north are hugely significant. In Kiryat Shimona, it's a city the size of Colwood, 20,000 people. The entire population has been evacuated and spread throughout Israel and places like Tiberias and other cities. So you think of what that does to a community and families and just the connectivity. And as we know, Israel is very much a very connected community. These people are spread across the country, so there's immense pressure on their social fabric. There's immense pressure on the other communities that have had to take them in, rec centers full to overflowing, and not just Kiryat Shimona, but many, many communities. So on the far right is a hospital there in Ziv, city in the Golan Heights. While we were there, was attacked by rocket fire from Hezbollah. Just a couple days ago, was in the news again. There was a direct hit right near the pediatric center there. The colorful sort of wall you see in front are concrete barricades, actually, to prevent shrapnel from damaging the main entrance, but it's painted that way because that's the pediatric entrance. So children coming for treatment don't have to just see concrete walls. The photo in the middle with the swastikas and crowd, that's Hezbollah folks gathered right on the border of a city called Metula. It's the northernmost city in Israel. The fellow on the far left there, his name, I believe, is Lev. He's a former Serat Maktel soldier with the IDF, now a farmer. He's a third-generation farmer in Metula. And he took this photo just through the fence. He's pointing at it on the far left there. So he can walk from his house and go a couple hundred meters and take photos of these people rallying across the side. Him and about 6 or 7 of his former IDF colleagues are the only people living in the town at the moment. They do so at their own risk. He's the civil defense commander there. And him and his former Sarat Maktal platoon basically are there to continue to try to harvest the crop. And be the sort of first line of defense if anything happens. The IDF has a presence there nearby, and they're in bases and things, but these guys just live in his house, and so every time they take the dog out, they go out a window or they go out a different door, they take a different route, they come back in a different way, and this is how he exists at the moment, prepared for Hezbollah to do something. And lastly, the big concern in the north is when do they return home? There's tens of thousands of people scattered throughout Israel with no return date in sight. And the sort of mantra there right now is the 1701 or 710. So there is fear of another October 7th there. And so they want the IDF to push Hezbollah north of Litani River. So it's 1701 is kind of a declaration. So nobody in the north feels safe coming back really north of kind of the Sea of Galilee area until such time as the threat from Hezbollah is removed. And that's just open-ended today. So we'll jump ahead here. I wanted to have some positive in there as well, some partnerships. So we were there with the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver, and some of the projects they were involved in were some of the places we went to. Save a Child's Heart, which is a pediatric cardiac center there. They're helping children with major heart conditions from around the world, and many of their patients were from Gaza prior to October 7th, and they've had to cease helping them, unfortunately. Shalva Center, Shalva National Center, the gentleman there, Mr. Samuel, his child suffered a vaccine illness at the age of 12, a reaction, and was forever altered. But he sort of built a hospital up around him to give him a quality of life that others wouldn't have. And there's tons of people with various different disabilities, children with Down syndrome, birth defects, adults, and they provide life. They provide respite care for parents of children with autism and other issues, so that they can kind of refresh and recalibrate and continue to parent their children. So a really wonderful hospital you can see on the right there. And then on the far left is the brand new Museum of Tolerance that's set to open in Jerusalem. The sort of outdoor amphitheater that you see there was financed by the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver and donations from the Diamond family and others. So a real Canadian connection, as many of you know, to Israel. The bonds are very strong. Jump ahead here. It's just a quick slide. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things that you talk about, but could spend hours on. But we met with the Canadian ambassador to Israel on the top left. I have to say it was one of my more disappointing meetings in life. I'll be very blunt. She faced some hard questions from some folks with us. Kept referring to everything as shades of gray. Very ambiguous in terms of her support for the Jewish community. And every time she referenced anti-Semitism, of course, she referenced Islamophobia. She could not separate the terms. Extremely disappointing. I'll just leave it at that. Former president of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, the gentleman here, as a former general in Moshe, I can't remember his last name, but with the IDF, he was the first person on the ground during the raid of Entebbe. So has been with the IDF for many, many years, but now is involved in NGOs and charitable work in Israel. And we met with members of the Christian community and the former Israeli ambassador to Canada and others to get a broad perspective on people's views there. Jump ahead again here. So there I am at the Western Wall on my second ever Shabbat experience, and of course enjoying shawarma. Anyone who's been to Tel Aviv knows the food is outstanding. A view of the top of Masada. I was able to get there into the Dead Sea on the same day that Iran decided to have a bit of a fireworks show. And with my friend Nico Slavinsky from CIJA in Vancouver, he reached out to me months after October 7th. I'd been very active in the social media space, as the rabbi knows, but kind of alone. And then I faced a sort of cancel culture attack from some coordinated folks with the pro-Palestine movement that said, well, let's get him fired. Let's do what we did with Selena Robinson. Hundreds and hundreds of letters sent to City Hall to say, get rid of this guy, to my regular day job. I work for a private practice hearing healthcare company, tried to get me fired from there, claiming that I was racist and Islamophobic and all of these things. And fortunately, folks in the Jewish community rallied to help me there. And Nico was very instrumental in that. He reached out to me. We'd never met before, but he said, "What can I do?" Folks in Victoria, the same thing. People said, "What can I do to help?" And and I'm still employed, so there's that. I can jump ahead here. So then it gets a little more difficult. Obviously we move towards the Gaza envelope. I hope I'm not going over time here and go faster if I need to. So met with a fellow named Grisha Yakubovich. He was the last IDF commander of Gaza before the withdrawal. Very well connected to the Arab community. Again, had some really great insights on what could happen, what should happen. I won't go into them all here, but you can find him online. He had a lot of really interesting articles prior to October 7th and post October 7th in various news media. But it's a picture I took from the border wall essentially towards the former community of Beit Hanun and to Jabil refugee camp. And then on the bottom right is Grisha talking at a children's play piece in Sderot, where it's reinforced concrete so that when you have 15-second warning to hide from a rocket attack, the children can get inside. You can't go more than a few hundred meters anywhere in Sderot without finding one of these concrete little bunkers or concrete emplacements in a playground. It's just an essential way of life there since roughly 2007 when Hamas took over. I think we'll jump ahead again here as well. So this is where it gets difficult, and I won't go into great detail. I mean, one of the things we did, we met with a former hostage families, survivors of the attack. In kibbutz Kfar Aza, which was one of the hardest hit kibbutzes on the border with Gaza, a resident there, Chen Kotler, lovely woman, she invited us into her home, walked us around. She was neighbors and best friends with Vivian Silver, a Canadian who you might have heard of, a peace activist who worked closely with Palestinians who was murdered. Chen walked us through. I've selected some fairly generic images here that you may have seen on the news and things. She shared some personal video and footage, as did some other folks, and things there that I've heard, I wish I could unhear, things I've seen that I wish I could unsee, to the point of talking to people about it. I mean, it absolutely barbaric and traumatic. I mean, it'll take a long time to kind of get over some of these things. But basically, in Kfar Aza, 52 residents were murdered, 20 were missing or taken hostage. And she said, the most painful moment for her actually was two of the young residents that were taken hostage were unfortunately the same ones that were accidentally killed by the IDF when they had escaped. So it was kind of a double blow to the community. But the small little houses you see in this picture on the bottom right, I just wanted to point that out, they're closest to the fence, to the kibbutz, to the fields. And they're the houses for young people in their 20s and so on. So they were the first ones hit, and that's where the majority of hostages were taken and people were killed. You can see it was an RPG blast through the door that killed young Mitzan here. And the bottom photo there's 7 of the guard members of the kibbutz were killed there at their armory. And Chen said later on one of the terrorist that was killed there by the IDF, they found detailed maps that had every house, every building, what its purpose was, every resident, and their ages and gender. Oh. So they came prepared. They used a ladder, which they were detailed that she had a ladder in her garage. They used the ladder to get on her roof and set up a sniper post opposite the armory. So when the kibbutz guard members went to the armory to get their weapons, all 7 there were shot at the door. They didn't stand a chance. So workers that had been brought into their kibbutz had drawn maps to scale for these terrorists so that they could methodically work their way through the kibbutz. So maybe we'll jump forward here. Oh, one too far, there we go, back one. Go up one more maybe, to 11 there. So just down the Highway 232 is the site of the Nova Music Festival. Again, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but over 330 people, primarily young people, were slaughtered there by Hamas and taken hostage. The photo on the right at the foreground of the many photos is a young man from Vancouver, Ben Mizrahi. He was a graduate of King David High School there, and he was a close friend of my friend's daughter who also attended King David. So some of the personal connections, some of the reasons why on October 7th, it hit very close to home to me. But we visited the spot where he died. His parents had made us aware exactly where it was. With the rabbis and the others with us, we lit some candles and said some prayers and spent some time there. Jump forward here. This is just a memorial area in a grove of trees, and all I'll really reference is that if you've heard of the documentary Screams Before Silence by Sheryl Sandberg, there's reference to an area of trees and some women and some things, and this is that spot. These young women all died in that same area, horrifically, and we just spent the day just really kind of taking it in, and I can't say any more about it really. We'll jump forward. And then this is back in Jerusalem and then in Tel Aviv. Both we met with hostages and families. The two folks on the left are immediate family members of people that are currently hostage. We also met with a former hostage and a few folks who survived the attack, one of whom managed to escape from her captors. We went to the hostage center, so the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, which is primarily staffed with volunteers. It's one story of a 4-story building in Tel Aviv where they spend all of their time working for the return of hostages. And on the far right is Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, where they have a place set for 134 people that remain in captivity. Jump forward one more here. And then, of course, the surprise, I joked with the Jewish Federation that they really didn't have to go that big and reach out to the Ayatollah and put on a show. But, we unfortunately got a red alert while we were out for dinner that Iran had launched a missile and drone strike. And, something I certainly hadn't been through before. The Israelis, as Naomi probably would attest, are a pretty resilient bunch. And the folks who were with, they said, well, what do we do? Do we go to a bunker? And I said, well, no, first we order another round because we've got an hour or two before they get here. So, very, very calm. And the story I tell people it's interesting is I thought, well, my wife will probably see this on the news back home, so I'm going to send her a text. So I sent her a text saying, hey, you'll probably see there's this military action that's happening. It's not as serious as it's made out to be. We're going to be safe. We're finishing up here. I'll let you know when I get to the hotel and to the bunker. Well, unbeknownst to me, that text never went through. So I got to the hotel, and later on, I sent her another quick text that said, don't worry, I'm in the bunker now. The missiles will hit soon, or they'll get shot down. It won't be a problem. So that's the only text she got when she was at a soccer game with our son. So she was a little concerned, to say the least. And then because of the airspace closure and what might happen and flight cancellations, ended up extending my stay in Israel unexpectedly by a number of days. We'll jump forward. This will be the last slide. I know I've taken a lot of time. I just wanted to mention Daniel. Daniel is now a very close friend of mine. We stay in touch. Daniel was our security guard while we were there, and he was fairly quiet, and a lot of the folks that knew each other would get together, and often I would just walk with him and chat, and so him and I kind of bonded, but that was before I knew his story, and eventually partway through, they had convinced him to tell his story to everybody else. And Daniel was he was a resident of Kibbutz Mephilism. I don't know how to pronounce it properly. Mephilism, something like that. It's up the road on Highway 232, just from the Nova Festival, and near Kibbutz Be'eri and Kfar Aza, right in the area where all the kibbutzes were attacked. And the night before October 7th, Mephilim, there you go.
These are the one who make the road,
Okay. Yeah, it's a small kibbutz just on the opposite side of Highway 232. And the night before, he'd been at Kfar Aza at those same little homes in the courtyard there. They'd had a birthday party for one of the residents, and they were all gathered there. And he was going to stay the night, but he had to work the next day, and he thought, no, I better take my bike and ride back up the road and go sleep at home, and he did. And that probably saved his life. On the morning of October 7th at 6:30, he heard the alarms like everybody, and decided, well, I'm in my safe room, I'll stay here, I'll be fine. And then a little while later, he heard a gunshot, and Moshe, the commander of the civil guard there, was running around trying to get everybody together to say, okay, we're under attack. He had only his handgun. He said he ran outside and there was a man with no shirt on pointing a rifle at him. He almost fired, and then they realized the other guy was an IDF reservist who had stayed the night visiting a friend. And they spoke to each other in Hebrew, realized we're friends, and they went to the gate along with the other members of the civil guard, where they held off about 70 Hamas terrorists for hours. Unfortunately, those terrorists, when they couldn't get in with RPGs and automatic weapons, turned their guns on people trying to escape the Nova Festival. They trapped them on the highway and slaughtered them by the dozens there. But Daniel fired until he ran out of ammunition, and then his friends kept firing. They were almost out of ammunition. He picked up a pitchfork and he thought, I'm going to die with a weapon in my hands. And luckily the IDF showed up at that moment. So he survived. He went to 16 funerals in the course of a couple weeks, couldn't attend others because of work commitments and things, but very quiet, unassuming fellow. And yeah, anyway, he's one of the many reasons that I will keep talking about it, keep sharing, keep trying to raise awareness to it. So that's what I have. So Am Israel Hai. Thank you.
Amen, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Torah comes to us in many words. Thank you very much. And I hope you'll stay for lunch. Do you have time? So I know